Okay. And so I'm just giving it a minute to let some more names in. I noticed some were still popping in. But then in the meantime, for those of you who are here, welcome. And I noticed a lot of these names are actually people who've been able to make our entire event tonight. So thank you so much just for taking the time to chat with us at Cronkite tonight and spending some of your night with us. So if you haven't met me before from the other events, my name's Sam. I'm the recruitment and admissions coordinator here at the Cronkite School. And I'm so excited to share with you our next panel to talk about developing your brand and social media tips here. So we do have Faith Abercrombie. You might recognize her from the last time in some of these other events we've had tonight. But then just in case you didn't meet her yet, she is a Cronkite ambassador, current student, and also is part of the Cronkite News Phoenix Bureau. And she's been a really influential part of that professional program by reporting on a wide variety of topics as a broadcast reporter, including the presidential election in the fall. So that's really cool. And then we also have Kayla Sumner, who's here as well. And she is an alum with the Cronkite School. And so she actually spent a year working in New York as a social and digital coordinator for investigation discovery. But she's actually back in Arizona and is continuing to work at an investigation discovery. And in January 2021, she joined the Travel Channel digital team as a blog manager. So she has a really wide breadth of knowledge and tips to share with you just about social media and like public relations in that realm. And she also previously worked at NBC and Warner Music Group, and you directed a video project for Instagram and BuzzFeed too. So all sorts of good experience and good knowledge there. And so, yeah, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. And if anybody in the audience has specific questions, feel free to chime in there and we could answer any of those questions. But for now, I'll go ahead with some starter questions just to get the conversation going. So specifically for Kayla, I know that for a lot of students who might be in like middle school or high school right now, the idea of like social media, like marketing or public relations is kind of like a new concept. And so how would you give kind of like a quick elevator pitch on what you do in your job and what it is about, if that makes sense?
Sure thing. So I am a social and digital coordinator for Investigation Discovery, also known as the Ivy channel, as well as the Travel channel. So what I do is I organize social calendars. So it's kind of the key to having social success is staying organized, keeping a calendar, planning ahead. So I'm very actively involved in what the social team for ID and travel are going to be doing for 30 days ahead and months ahead and kind of like a year ahead. I already know what we're going to be doing. And then I also help with social strategy and brainstorming. So coming up with all the cool viral ideas, keeping up with trends. So yeah, I would say I'm a blog manager. So I write and edit blog posts kind of like an editor as you do like a school newspaper or magazine. But then I also dip my toes in social media, which is pretty much my expertise.
That's awesome. That's cool. I didn't know that you would plan things out so far in advance. And so how are you able to kind of plan that out and predict possibly how that would work for the future?
Sure. So basically, we keep a calendar and we have themes for each month, which is really helpful. So kind of, you can even apply that to your own social media. So, you know, like, oh, you know, spring break's coming up, you know, you're going to have your fly picks, you know, that by December of the previous year that your spring break picks, they got to be fired. So that's kind of how it works. But on a marketing scale, you figure out what priorities your company, brand, newspaper, whatever is going to be coming up, whether it be a presidential election, local election, whatever is important to wherever you're working. You want to jot that down as far in advance as possible, and then work with your team to come up with ideas for how you're going to promote that.
Okay, awesome. And so even for both the like that digital blog side and for a broadcast reporter side, how would you kind of predict what could ring with your audience? Like, what do you think they would like?
For my audience at Travel
Yeah, the
or
questions
with
for
news?
both Kayla and for Faith, so.
Oh, Faith, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so just going off of like developing your brand based off of your audience, I mean, that kind of goes off of what stories you're pitching in general and kind of what people are talking about. Sometimes we find our stories or our next thing we're talking about on the newscast or in our digital story from Twitter, from social media. That's where a lot of people are talking about the news or different things that are going on or events you can hear about or the progress of a bill or different things like that. That's kind of how we find some of our stories sometimes. And we're continuing on that conversation as a journalist with our online platforms and kind of spreading this news more by contributing to it, whether that's finding your own sources and doing your own story or retweeting or whatever that may be. So kind of just searching social media in general, you would be surprised by some of the stories we've been able to pitch just because what people are talking about on Twitter today or whatever that may be.
I would absolutely agree with you, Faith. I think it's really important to stay tapped into the conversation of whatever your focus is. If your focus is news, you want to make sure you're following people who are really on the ground. I mean, you of course want to be a part of that, but you want to make sure that you're always ahead of the conversation. And it's pretty easy to do that when you kind of look back at previous years, how things were covered. And so, yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, how would you, what kind of advice do you have for people who would want to figure out what their brand is? Because it's kind of early into people's careers. Some of us are still in high school. And so, what do you recommend people do now to plan ahead by the time they like are in college or whatever their future plans include?
I can kind of talk about sometimes your brand might change. So, for example, I knew I loved being a reporter. I knew I loved being a journalist. Never once did I think I would be doing weather for my news program. And that was something that I started doing on Wednesdays. And when I started doing it, when you are covering weather and you're talking about it, you kind of incorporate that into your brand, which kind of changed for me. Probably not before I was doing weather on our Wednesday's newscast. I wasn't tweeting about the weather in the valley or in Phoenix or in northern Phoenix and the snow. I probably wasn't doing that before. So sometimes your brand kind of can change. I think it's important to just learn to grow with that and to, of course, always keep it professional, but to be flexible with knowing that sometimes you can be covering different things, you can be doing different things. So just being flexible with kind of what you're all about on social media, your brand in general, your website, your reel, whatever that may be. You're incorporating all these different things that kind of make up you.
Hi guys. I just had a quick question. When do you guys think when do you think is an appropriate time to do a full-fledged rebrand? And then when do you and how often do you think you should go about doing that? If that's when the time comes, when is too much?
I would say that if you're going to do a big rebrand, you want to plan and set small and realistic goals. So set a timeline for yourself of how you're going to ease into that. And then also, set attainable goals that are kind of numeric. Like I plan to be posting 3 times a day as part of my new brand. I plan to be interact with this amount of people. So in order to rebrand, you have to make yourself known. You have to figure out what makes you stand out and then how you're gonna kind of get that message out to people. Let me know if that's clear for you.
Yeah, that's definitely clear. Thank you.
Sure thing.
That's funny. He was reading my mind because that was literally my next question was how much is too much, you know? And so, you know, another question that I always wondered too, like when I was going to school at Cronkite, I know that there was this thing going around between like some of my peers where it was like, oh, never have more people that you follow than your own followers. Like, I don't know, have you guys heard of that before? And do you think that follower counts really matter, whether it's you following people or people following you?
I don't really think so. I think the more people you follow, the more people you're engaging with just naturally. So if you're only following two people, you're only interacting with two people. I will say, you don't want to follow too many people. I can't give an exact number because it's all relative to kind of whoever your audience is. But I would say like the idea that you need to kind of like get your follower count down to a certain amount, a pretty number ratio, it's not as important as the quality of content you're putting out.
I definitely could agree. And I know exactly what you're saying by sometimes maybe following too many people. Sometimes for Twitter, for example, there's so much information and so much coming in at once. You want to make sure you're actually reading it and seeing who you are following, whether it's different news outlets or sources or different organizations, whatever that may be. You want to make sure you're actually seeing that as a social media user in general. So it is important to do that. There's plenty of tips on different apps, but for example, with Twitter, I know you can make lists, and I'm from California and I kind of have a California news list and an Arizona news list. So I can kind of go on different ones to see what I'm looking at, or else it's going to be a whole feed of everything. So definitely kind of keep organized, if that makes sense, with your own followers and who you're following.
Yes, and so setting notifications can be really helpful too. So if you know that there's an account or a person that you want to keep top of mind or at the top of your feed, set those notifications and you know, engage with them.
The notifications are a really good idea too. I know that, you know, like I specifically follow someone with like gaming news, and it's always nice to be like on the cuff for those kinds of things. And really it helps a lot, especially if you're trying to develop a brand in a specific beat or role, and you just keep in touch with all that news. So it's a good idea. I also see a question in the Q&A, and they're asking, when is it time to stop posting on, for example, Twitter, about a story that you might be covering live?
I'm understanding your question as if you're working on a kind of a long-term story, or yeah, I think that's what your question is asking. I would say you want to post pretty frequently about a story that you're working on at the beginning. But I would say, if possible, if the story's still ongoing, never stop posting about it. Just decrease the frequency in which you're posting about it as time goes on. But the more you stay connected to topics that you've previously touched on, the more your followers get a chance to see the care and effort that you're putting into the stories that you're working on. Especially on Twitter, you can keep threads, you can revisit those threads, you can quote tweet something you've previously tweeted. So there's all types of strategies that you can kind of use with Twitter to, you know, keep up with an older story that you want to revive or refresh.
Definitely. I mean, those are great tactics to use to stay organized, whether it's quote tweeting or threads. Sometimes a story lives on and you don't revisit it until later and when something else happens. And so when you have that thread, you can kind of go back to it and update the story and update your viewers. So it too much is not really necessarily the right word, but maybe less frequent. But you can always revisit a story, update a story, correct a story, whatever that may be. But those threads on Twitter, for example, are super helpful.
Yeah, people love to see stories keep going, especially if it's something that your followers are expressing that they are interested in. Pay attention to that, which you naturally do. Your notifications will let you know. Pay attention to that, and keep a note of something that you want to revisit.
And so these are really great tips to keep in mind, just especially for Twitter. And so what about other social media platforms as well? Like, do you think it's kind of like a one size fits all, or do some of them have slightly different rules that you apply it to?
I'm going to touch on Instagram because I just feel like that is the app that a lot of people are using. That's where a lot of people get their information, regardless of what it is. So with Instagram, the key, this ties in branding and everything, is to find a consistent topic that you want to keep going, whether it be every other day or every week. So you want to create a series of some sort, whatever it is, whether that series be, here's a roundup of the stories I'm working on, and here are the highlights. Whether it be, if you're into fashion, like here are my favorite fashion looks. And then you want to tie in interactive elements into that. So if you're working on stories, do a poll. What stories would you like to see? This or that? How much, you can ask your followers whatever you're curious about, or whatever you feel like you're struggling with, ask them directly. And people are usually pretty responsive to that. So just have something consistent that you can always continue on. And that's part of goal setting, consistency, and that's gonna lead you to be successful. Because if people can come to you for that one specific thing, they're not gonna, stop. They're gonna keep coming back for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so I do see quite a few questions from the chat too. So then I'll go ahead and ask these. So Jordan asked, do you think keeping an organized feed is important?
To an extent, like for example, there's the grid theory that if you go out of your Instagram feed, that it should all look consistent. That's not too important, but staying organized, yes. So organized in the sense that, like I said, if you're gonna have a topic, you want to make sure that you're serving quality versions of that content, and you want to use great visuals, and visuals take time to either gather or to create, so let the visuals kind of guide your feed and organize your feed for you.
Awesome. And so I see, Faith, you're going to tackle the next question there.
Yeah, so someone else asked, is it possible to separate personal life from professional life in the broadcast journalism world? Yes, it is possible. I know many different colleagues of mine, they'll either have a professional reporter Instagram and a kind of showing your friends and family and where you're from Instagram, two separate ones, or some people choose to combine those. For example, if you go on any of my social media, you'll probably see that I am a recent aunt. I've been posting my niece up a storm, but it also is a place where I stay professional and I'm posting news. And so it is possible to keep it separate if you do want to do that. But it's also possible to combine the two. You just have to kind of find a balance of both. Most times now people will kind of combine the two. It kind of makes you feel more relatable to your audience. It's kind of easier to manage one social media account instead of multiple different ones. But I've met people who've done both. So it just depends on what you want to do.
Awesome. And then anything else to add to that too, Kayla?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like Faith said, it's a lot easier to manage one account. I think nowadays, with a lot of broadcast journalism students and professional broadcast journalists, you want to find a way to distinguish yourself from everyone else. You don't want to just be a copy paste of what the perfect journalist should look like. But it is important to protect your personal life as a broadcast journalist or as anyone, going into media. Pick what parts of yourself or your personality that you're comfortable sharing. Like Faith said, family, those are kind of like pretty safe areas, but you want to draw boundaries with your work and your personal self. So use your personality to stand out and to allow that to help build trust, because that's really important to the storytelling. If people don't feel like there's a real life interesting person behind the account, or behind the information, they're less likely to trust it. So get to know your followers, let them get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome advice, because even I think posting about yourself every now and then is just nice, because it shows that you're not just some kind of bot behind the scenes that just posts about stories and things like that. You're actually a human and you have a life, and of course do it in moderation, just from my point of view. But then I think that's really helpful to at least post every now and then. But it's also respect to people who want to keep their personal lives private too. So it's very much up to you. And so I know that Faith, you mentioned that you wanted to answer that next question from Talia too.
Yeah, so with the new social media algorithms, what is the best way to stay relevant on your audience's timeline? So I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is TikTok. You'll see a lot of people in journalism using TikTok as a way to share news, but to also participate in the trends. We are human too, and I've seen a lot of journalists participate in some of the dances or whatever's going on TikTok. We've actually experimented with TikTok here at Cronkite News, and we've done a mix of both putting out our news stories in a shorter, condensed video, whether it's 60 seconds or shorter. We're doing that, but we're also kind of seeing what are the trending sounds and participating in that as well. So we're kind of combining the mix of two, whether it's Instagram or Facebook. Tips for that, I think, is just you're kind of looking at what these other news outlets are covering. And if you're not covering them, or if your news outlet isn't, or your organization isn't, you kind of think, why aren't we covering this? So looking at what other people are doing as well, or maybe the opposite, looking at what other people aren't doing. And as a viewer, what kind of questions are unanswered? So to stay relevant, you want to answer those questions and make sure people are coming to you to kind of find that out. So of course, there's many different apps. TikTok is just an example of kind of keeping it professional, displaying your news there, but you can also participate in the trends and the sounds and combine that with news.
Yeah, and anything to add to that too, Kayla?
Yes, like Faith said, TikTok is fantastic in terms of staying relevant. It lets people know that you're creative, that you care about being engaged on social media. And the sounds are great because it helps you kind of stay in touch with what's trending always and tapping into that. So it actually helps you naturally get your news hat on, because you're kind of doing research when it comes to watching and posting TikToks or IG Reels as well. I know TikTok's more popular, but yeah, don't be afraid to experiment with Reels. I would actually say Instagram kind of rewards experimentation when it comes to that. So don't be discouraged if you see your likes or your views dip a little bit when you experiment. But if there's something you enjoy doing, stay consistent with it. Think out of the box constantly. Keep in touch with those sounds, those trends, all of it, and get involved. Try everything out.
And so I love that we're also talking about how to engage our audiences. And so what qualities are in a social media post that you both would consider good social media posts? Like, is there one defining quality that makes something good?
Yes. So visuals. Um, the visual it should be able to tell a story without a caption, first of all. Of course, there's going to be, if you're, telling live updates about something, you won't be able to, of course, always get visuals for everything. But for something more curated, like a planned feed post, that's key. And then also, you want to think very carefully about the message that you're sending with your caption. So kind of like when you're writing a caption, don't make it too long, but also don't make it too short. So I would say around like 2 to 3 sentences would be ideal for Instagram, or something longer if it's a little bit more of a passionate post. For Twitter, you want to keep it as short as possible. So caption is key. Research what works for each platform and what's been working well with what you've been posting. But yeah, so visuals, caption, and then also tagging. If it's important, tag it. If you're in a really cool location or in a location that's essential to what you're trying to convey, tag it. If there's a person or organization or company that should be tagged, tag it. Hashtags, you don't want to put too many, but if you're if a topic is known by a hashtag, you'll know, because people will probably say it out loud, like with the hashtag. So make sure you use that, and try to be as specific as possible if you are hashtagging, so that your post is more discoverable. Okay, so in all, visuals, caption, tags.
Yeah, those are all incredible, great tips that you should be using. It kind of creates a more well-rounded post instead of just one thing, but makes it more known and more people can see it with those hashtags, tagging, things like that. With your brand in general, I think it's important to do things on multiple different platforms in different formats. So being a journalist, it's important to be a multimedia journalist. So you're doing a broadcast piece or a social media live tweeting piece or a digital piece. Every news consumer is different. Some people only look at Instagram, some people only look at Twitter, some people only look at the news sites and read the written articles, some people only tune in on TV and watch the videos. So whatever that may be, you just want to make sure whatever you're covering can be found on multiple different platforms in different ways, because every news consumer is different.
I'm glad that you both touched on like hashtags and those kind of visual tips and things like that. It's funny for me, like I'm not that old, but I feel like sometimes I'm old when I look at things like TikTok, because I'm still trying to keep up with that myself. And like with hashtags, I was wondering if those were like still relevant, because I noticed that with some people they don't post them as often, and maybe it just depends on the platform. But so you still feel like hashtags are still very much relevant as long as they're used in moderation?
Yes, I would say for Twitter, hashtags are still really important, especially for reporting. If you are on the ground and you want people to see your posts, you're gonna have to kind of search a few different keywords to see what the main hashtag is, to make sure you have the right one. And then use that as much as possible so that people can find all of your posts. And your reporting. And then when it comes to like Instagram, I definitely wouldn't hashtag every post, but a smart tactic to keep your engagement up is to actually put your hashtags in the comments. So you can add a comment under your own post with the hashtags if you're worried about, a toss up of, it affecting your engagement, which it likely won't. But yeah, hashtags aren't, you definitely don't want to use a lot of hashtags on Instagram. But if it's relevant, use that. For TikTok, hashtags are super, super important, because the trends are big, but also pretty small when they first start out. So try, if you hop on a trend pretty early, use that hashtag, or in the TikTok case, the sound. That's kind of the hashtag of TikTok.
Awesome. And so, yeah, I was gonna say, Faith, do you have anything to add too?
I was just gonna say, when you were talking about Twitter and hashtags, that kind of made me think, sometimes that's how you find sources too. So hashtags are super important to just follow in general. I did a story about a little bit ago, there was a shortage of the second dose of the vaccine, because obviously more vaccines is more needles. And so people were having trouble getting their second dose. So I was literally looking up hashtag second dose, hashtag Arizona, hashtag State Farm Stadium, which is one of our mass vaccination sites. I was looking to kind of keep along with these hashtags with who's tweeting about this, who could possibly talk to me. So including it in your own post, but also following them too, can help with your own brand to get those true sources who are literally going through what you're talking about, which was for me, people that were having trouble scheduling their second dose. And it was really easy to find that through social media and hashtags. So keeping up with that as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And then what are some tips for people who might want to try to start their own hashtag too? Because I feel like that probably isn't so easy when you have some trends that are already really growing with an audience. So what are some tips that you could share about, creating your own hashtag?
So if you're creating your own hashtag, it has to be something that rolls off the tongue, something that's not more than 3 words, and little connector words like to and, those don't really count, but something that will go on one line and not move over to the next line, and something catchy if possible. Not every subject is going to be catchy. You got to be sensitive to whatever topic you're focusing on, but also like you can go off of previous hashtags that'll be related to come up with your own. So find inspiration if you're creating your own hashtag. Keep it really narrow to a very specific subject within a subject if possible. Yeah, just if you can imagine people reusing it, you then make the hashtag. If it's something that someone might be like, what does that mean? Then probably not a good hashtag.
Absolutely. And then I know that this is going back a little bit in an older topic, but when it comes to posting about like opinions, maybe things that are going on politically, what are your opinions on that as either a journalist or a social media coordinator? Do you feel like that it's appropriate to share personal opinions, or do you feel like that's something you should avoid?
I think it's really important to confide in a mentor of some sort, because that all is really relative. I think especially with journalism and journalism school, the idea of what counts as an opinion is pretty rigid. But I think there are some topics that are important for you to share, that even though they might count as an opinion to some, it's important to stay engaged and share resources if relevant. But I would advise, if you're sharing an opinion or a controversial topic, you are inviting conversation, period. So if you're ready to respond and engage in conversation, do share, kind of regardless of the subject. If you're not ready to open up a conversation, maybe pull back for a second, and always think before you share something opinion related. Take a step back, take an hour, think, is this something that is going to productively contribute to my following? Is this helpful? Is it respectful? Those are really key things to be mindful of.
Cool. And then anything to add to that as well, Faith?
I mean, I agree. All those key points. Is it respectful? Is it productively adding to a conversation? Is it important to let your audience to know about something? Just keep all of those things in mind in being ready for that conversation if you do share something.
Okay, perfect. And then we have one question here from the Q&A from Jordan. So how do you feel about joint accounts or multiple admins per page?
I think that's great. I don't think that it necessarily affects the way that people engage with your content. So if that's what works for you, do it, but keep a calendar and make sure you stay organized.
I definitely agree. Staying organized, and if you're working with different people, let's say if your news outlet or organization or whatever that may be has multiple admins, just keeping that constant conversation about what's next, and kind of that calendar we were talking about earlier, kind of knowing what's in the future and planning ahead and making sure everyone is looped in on the conversation.
And then do you, just to change a topic as well, so do you think that there is a social media account that's very underrated for what kind of audience it can draw or for the attention that it's not getting? Like, do you think people should be using a certain social media platform that others might not be on just yet?
Good question. Faith, do you want to answer that one first?
Yeah, I mean, I know we kind of touched on this, and TikTok is a huge thing within our generation. But I think as a journalist or whatever your profession may be at all, even if it's not journalism, I think you can really incorporate it to reach a wide range of audience. I think TikTok is obviously up and coming, and it has been, but definitely incorporating that, for example, journalism, kind of combining that with news. I think that's a huge asset to your newsroom, or you as a journalist, or you developing your own brand in general. It kind of lets your audience know that you're kind of staying with what's in the trend, what app people are using, and people within this generation are using that app. So I think TikTok, definitely you can combine that with some professional things as well, whether it's your news stories or different things like that.
Yeah, I was going to say TikTok, but I wanted to gauge kind of like, because you are part of the program and kind of closer to what people, you probably know more. So, but I would say, yeah, TikTok for me, because with my brand in investigation discovery, we do true crime, we do really sensitive storytelling. So TikTok is known for being kind of a fun and, really laid back app. And so when you're telling sensitive stories on there, you want to make sure that it's really thoughtful. So we were kind of one of the first brands, if not the first brand, to step into the true crime realm on TikTok. And the way that we did that was just kind of allowing videos to tell the story. And what I mean by that is finding trending video that we had access to or had gathered or created, and then focused on that first. And so tapping into trending video, and then we've found a lot of other ways to experiment since with TikTok. But I would say it's an app that some people might be a little bit afraid of. Maybe afraid is the wrong word, but it's a new territory for people. And whenever there's new territory, you got to hop on that. Do your research, try things out. Don't be afraid to fail, but also research what's going viral on the app. Kind of try to understand why it went viral, and then try to apply that same formula to your own account in a smaller way.
Yeah, that's it. I would like agree with you just from I was for a limited time in a newsroom before I came to the Cronkite school as an employee. And so I feel like, whenever you would notice those trends to see what people are up to, I feel like newsrooms would all of a sudden in one big fell swoop would try to join that social media platform and do what they can. And so I feel like places are still trying to figure out TikTok and what they can do. It's just, I also feel like I mentioned earlier, I'm still out of the loop and still trying to figure out how TikTok works. And so it just goes to show that there are people who are still learning new things and trying to figure out how we could use social media to our best interest, especially with such vastly different audiences. Because some of us might know more, like our parents are probably on Facebook, whereas we might not be. And so I just always found that interesting too. So yeah, I think that, we're almost out of time. We just have about a minute left. So I don't know if you guys had any lasting bits of advice or knowledge to impart on our friends here, or if you feel like you're good to go.
I wanted to leave just a few nuggets of advice. I guess one thing I would say is have a purpose when it comes to your posting. Find out how you can positively contribute to your following, and how you can kind of better your community, whatever that community may be. And then also I would say don't be afraid to make yourself known. You don't need to draw attention to yourself in kind of like a, ridiculous way, but don't be afraid to kind of like get creative. Find a way to make yourself unique. People respond really well to that, believe it or not. Professionalism always comes first, because it's a digital footprint. Whatever you post, it's going to be pretty hard to scrub off the internet. The delete button is not what it used to be. So be really mindful of whatever you're sharing. And then also just be authentic. I know that's really weird to say because social media is kind of very curated and a little bit fake sometimes. But be authentic in the sense that whatever you're comfortable sharing about yourself or your personality, tap into that and be consistent with that.
Definitely, I can agree with all of that advice. It's important to be positive and positively contribute to your society as a journalist, as your own brand, whatever that may be. But it's important to kind of not be afraid to try new things, to be creative. TikTok, we never thought newsrooms would be on TikTok, but here they are trying these ridiculous trends sometimes. But just don't be afraid and put yourself out there and to try new things. And these apps are always developing new things all the time. I mean, Twitter has stories now. Just try new things to get more exposure and to positively contribute to your audience.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys so much. And so, Kayla, I think that went to just me, your handles. So just to go ahead.
Oh yeah, let me go ahead and copy that.
Yeah, no worries. And then I believe it looks like that's what Faith's doing too. So then, yeah, feel free to reach out to all of us. I know that, we ran out of time for now, but if you have any questions for us, we're more than happy to be able to chat with you for a bit, give you any sort of other advice you might be curious about. And it doesn't have to be specifically social media advice too. I mean, all of us were students at some point, and so, or currently in Faith's case, but like, we'd love to share any kind of advice with you about like what it's like to be part of the alum network, part of Cronkite School, part of college in general. Let us know. We're always more than happy to help. And I also included a link to our giveaway for the chance to win a digital camera kit too. And so that's up there earlier. But then, if you had any other questions, again, let us know. And thank you so much, because this last event concluded our Cronkite School Off the Record event for tonight. So just thank you so much for all of your time, for tuning in with us and chatting with us for a bit too. And thank you to STN for also hosting us as well. But again, thank you so much for your time, and any questions, just let us know. I'll go ahead and put my contact information too as I'm finishing up here. But thank you so much to our panelists as well, for both Kayla and Faith, for taking some time to chat with us as well. So thank you all so much again, multiple thanks, and have a good rest of your night and be safe. Take care.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Thank you.